The past 2 years, you've been a program manager on the United States side for Watering the Banyan Tree, a peace building initiative that Karuna Center coordinates in Myanmar. And you've just recently returned from Thailand, across the border from Myanmar, from the final gathering of the project, which was actually been the first full gathering of the project at all.
Yeah. So our project started in Myanmar, started in September 2020, and we were just getting out of like an inception phase when the coup happened, which happened in February 1st. There were, aside from COVID restrictions on people gathering, there was also the coup restrictions on people gathering. So that's what a lot of the partners have been dealing with in Myanmar, implementing the project activities, which include dialogues and dialogue training, facilitation training, advocacy, because there was a lot of repression. There still is a lot of repression, and it's just difficult to gather, to talk about religious freedom, to talk about simple things, which we would think is simple things, let alone freedom um, and just gathering. So we had to meet in Thailand because even though Myanmar is now open for international travel, we thought it was the safest thing to do was to try to bring the partners to a different country than have them gather in Yangon, for example, especially if I was to go and for them to be seen with someone that's clearly a foreigner, as I would be seen as a foreigner if I were to go to Myanmar. And that would put them at risk. That would raise questions for like, why are they meeting with this person and who is this person? And then you see that I work for an organization called Karuna Center for Peacebuilding, and that raises a lot of questions about the type of work they're doing, and that may be seen as pro-democracy, and then they become targets. And we are glad that it was possible that we were able to meet in person for the first time right at the end of the project, but it was so necessary. It was a moment for people to connect with those they've been working for the past 2 years and to have a space to start trying to heal together.
Mm-hmm. What was it like to meet everyone for the first time and for everybody to meet each other?
It's different. It's exciting to see someone in 3D, to be able to share meals and laugh and go see Bangkok a little bit and just experience each other's companies in a way that's not restricted to 1 hour a month in a virtual setting. So it was yeah, very nice. And it's just there is the magic of being in person that it you end up talking about things, you see what people are eating and what they're doing in the time that they're not staring at the screen, and that just creates such a better work environment, and you really like get to know people and who they are outside of what they're doing for the project, and that just it's beneficial for everyone, for the entire project and for all the relationships. So it's good.
Yeah, I know that the you mentioned before that the program manager in Myanmar, who's a Myanmar citizen, really wanted to make an in-person gathering happen.
Yes, yes, she was very committed to that. And we were going to have a different event in person in September, but then the security situation deteriorated. And 2 days before it was supposed to happen, we had to cancel that gathering that was supposed to be just an advanced dialogue training that we had to move to online, and just didn't happen in person. And it was always very participatory. We had the participants selected and we were in touch with the participants. And as long as they felt comfortable traveling, we were on board with having it be on person. But 2 days before, it just became clear that the checkpoints had increased and there was more scrutiny about people's movements just the week prior. So we decided we did not want to put them at risk, even though they were still fairly comfortable with taking the risk. we decided to not have it in person. So that was a disappointment. Back in September, it was going to be our one in-person event. That didn't happen, but it just things changed like they do by every week, sometimes. So this was our last chance to have it in person, to have everyone meet. So I'm glad it worked out.
And what did, so if this, was this also an advanced dialogue training, or was this a broader scope of an event? Like what did you all do?
Yeah, this was really just a partners meeting. It was a space for the partners to meet, and just be together and talk about the project itself, look back in these 2 years and what went well, what didn't go so well, what we learned from each other, how we would do things differently if we were to work together again. But also look at what we accomplished, what we had an exercise at the beginning of the project. I actually wasn't there for this exercise. It was like a month before I joined Corona Center, but it was like a work plan mapping of like the activities and then what you expect to do, what you would like not to do, what you expect to see, what you like to see, and what you would love to see. Mm-hmm. So a good exercise that our consultant did was to look back at that and see that we actually accomplished most of what we expected to see, a lot of what we like to see. And you would be surprised in the amount of like what we would love to see that we actually accomplished, considering that there was a coup, that there was COVID, that there was so many challenges with the implementation, that it was nice and refreshing and grounding to see that there was so much that was actually accomplished and successfully accomplished. And then talking about the future a little bit, it's difficult for them to talk about the future, to be honest. It's still so uncertain that it's hard. They kind of want to avoid thinking about what is tomorrow or what is next year or in 6 months, because you don't dare to hope for too much, but you also don't want to plan on the worst of the scenarios. So it's a little difficult to talk about future, but there's definitely a lot of courage and willingness and like that desire to keep fighting for their country and for the people who live there.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious if it's okay to share some of the things that they would have loved to see and that they felt like had been accomplished.
Yeah, I think, for example, there were like trainings about how you can do more like peace building related work and dialogue within your community. And I think they like expect to see is that like people understand the concept of dialogue and so forth. And then like would love to see is that people are like taking the initiative and they're like initiating dialogues by their own and they're creating like events within their own communities. So that level of like engagement and initiative, it's like we would love to see, but that we can't control that, right? That the people are going to like take to the concepts that we're like trying to pass on and like just like
that happens.
Yes, for one of them that happened. Yes. So for them to like a little bit like take it and run with it, which is what we would love to see. In one of the activities, it did happen. Yes.
That's great. And I wanted to ask you about the partners. I know we can't name them, but is there a way to give a sense of who they are and kind of what they do?
So this project's very much focused on like interfaith dialogue. Really have that exchange of like why different religions think the way they think and build that trust and like humanize the other by just, yes, we believe in different things, but for very similar reasons and with different purposes, right? They want the same things even though their faith manifests in different ways. So that type of dialogue in the especially Buddhist communities just work on building that type of dialogue, and I don't like the word tolerance, but tolerance amongst different religions.
Well, and it's something that might not seem really radical to someone in the United States context, that kind of work. But correct me if I'm wrong. But in the context of Myanmar, you have a military coup that very much, or now a junta that very much draws on this Buddhist identity as like a nationalist identity, and kind of there being a complex relationship there, that being a primarily Buddhist country, and then on the other hand, also a lot of human rights abuses against ethnic and religious minorities.
Correct,
So
yes.
this kind of project is important to do for in any context, but here is hopefully this. I'm assuming hopefully is helping to support human rights work in terms of helping people to find common ground among each other.
And it's important to add that context that there is, I mean, the back of like everything that I just said is exactly that there is repressed religious minorities, which is why it's so important to create this dialogue. There is interreligious dialogue for people to understand each other. And then that's another setback of the project, was that we had a previous project, Seeds of Karuna, that started the interreligious dialogue, and we're really ready to advance on the gains from that project and have different religious groups talks amongst themselves. But then with the coup, it became difficult to know where each person stood in relation to what was happening. So the trust amongst religious group really evaporated with the coup. So instead of going ahead and continue having these interreligious groups dialogues, people did not even feel safe talking about, or yes, talking about dialogue and about just talking to each other within their own religious groups. So we had to take a step back and do, okay, let's do a dialogue group with then monks only or nuns only, and build that type of trust. And then we can move on to like the interreligious thing, which was initially more the goal of the project. So we had to pivot and adapt a little bit to the new reality and the lack of trust, really, that was happening. And it's understandable because there's a lot of surveillance. You don't know where people
so
are.
you don't know who is in support of the military government and who is
not.
Yes. Yeah, I think I forget that, hearing about the strength of the movement against the coup in Myanmar, that it's not going to be universal, that there are powerful organizations and institutions and religious leaders who support the military government, right?
Yes, there is. And I had a meeting there too in Thailand, because now most organizations who are present in Myanmar are in Bangkok area or Chiang Mai area. So the feeling is that the next year will be very important to see how much the movement can structure itself and like come up with a system and just make sure that everyone feel like they're part of it and like their voices are being heard, without allowing that to paralyze the movement for democracy. So there is a balance there that has to happen with it being inclusive, but also being decisive and well structured and have a system, and to be able to push and move things forward. But if not everyone if everyone doesn't think like they're part of it, um, is it going to have the strength it needs to actually have significant gains?
And that's where dialogue skills can help to strengthen a social movement.
Yes, yes,
Make it more
correct. That's where dialogue was really, really important because even this feeling of belonging and making sure that everybody's heard and they feel like they're part of it, that's the key of dialogue and how dialogue is so important to that. So not only in the community levels like we've been working, I think this type of work is important on more of the institutional leadership level of the movement.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share about like impressions going back from the gathering or what you took away from it?
Um, it's just like, I mean, I've been working with like Karuna for 2 years, right? And I know like the peace building work is heavy, and I hear stories a lot of times that just like break my heart. But being in this meeting in the same room with people who are like, can't wait to go home, and then they tell you that they're going to go through like several checkpoints, that they're going to check their cell phone, they're going to check their suitcase, they might even like ask them to remove their clothes, and they still want to go back home, right?
Mhm.
And then it's just like freedom, and it just takes a whole new level, and so many things that we take for granted just doing this type of work sitting in my home. It's heavy. It was heavy. It was like really emotionally draining. Um, and I was there for 2 days talking to them about their reality, but they live it every day.
Yeah.
So just like the level of like trauma and the need for psychosocial support
Mhm.
is just, yeah, it's something that really, yeah, impressed me too, that if there is like another project or something else Corona wants to focus in the future, I think a strong psychosocial support, a psychosocial component is very much needed because yeah, it's not easy. um you don't have like a private space to be in a meeting, and you don't want people in a public space overhearing what you're saying because it doesn't feel safe. And there are still power cuts all over Myanmar, so a lot of places don't have electricity at night, so that makes it difficult for them to participate. The costs of data on your cell phone have been like climbing and climbing and climbing, so to make it really difficult for people to be able to afford to be connected.
Mm.
And then connectivity itself is it was a challenge too. So the 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 partners like to tell a story of a monk that climbed up a tree so he would be high enough to actually have cell phone reception. And then they see him in the video, and they just see the branches around him. And I was like,
Oh
where
my.
are you? He's like, I'm here up in the tree to be able to
That's
to be
how he
able to
attended
connect,
his Zoom workshop
right?
for training.
Yeah, from like at the top of a tree. So I think that goes uh it's a long way that people came from right after the coup, not wanting to join, not feeling like it's safe, and just looking over their shoulders all the time, to then climbing up trees so they could be part of it and they could join. So I thought it was really interesting that with our watering the banyan tree project had people climbing up trees to have enough reception to join um, our trainings.